Nikon's acquisition of Red in 2024 was the direct result of a patent dispute, where Red alleged that Nikon had used various technologies of theirs in their latest cameras like the Nikon Z9. But instead of continuing the legal battle, Nikon opted to purchase Red, giving them a solid cinema presence where none had existed before. And this acquisition grants Nikon access to all of Red's proprietary technology, their advanced imaging patents and expertise, particularly when it comes to digital cinema cameras, renowned for their high dynamic range, their color science used in Hollywood, television, and Netflix. And thanks to all this technology, it looks like we're going to see the benefits in the upcoming Nikon Z9 II. But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. Not only is Nikon expected to leverage all of Red's technology, but they've already filed their first patent application. And it's a big one. In Japanese patent 2024-138158, filed on July the 30th, 2024, and published October the 7th, 2024, Nikon claims to obtain an imaging signal by a rolling electronic shutter system, and an imaging signal by a global electronic shutter system in a single frame. Did you pick up on that? Well, there's actually a few things in there. One, they're talking about two shutter systems, a rolling shutter and a global shutter. But not only that, the patent application, it was filed back in July, and it got published in October. That's the shortest cycle I've ever seen. Now, when Canon normally files patent applications, it usually takes about 2 years. And I think, well, there's a good reason for it taking that long too, is it hides what they're working on. This is a way of leaking to the marketplace what they're working on without saying it through public means. But let's go back to this quote. If you reread it, it does kind of look like Nikon's proposing two sensor systems in a single camera, but it isn't. But if we go back to the patent application and take a deep dive through the means of solving, what we can find out is that the patent doesn't propose having two physical shutters in a single camera. Instead, it describes using one image sensor that's capable of offering, and here's the key here, two different modes: a rolling electronic shutter mode and a global electronic shutter mode, all in the same frame. Is your brain hurting just a little bit? Are you trying to wrap your mind around a sensor in a Nikon, let's say Z9, because the Nikon Z9 is their high-end mirrorless camera. It's any sort of advanced technology is going to come out in that camera first, and with it due to be refreshed over, let's say, the next 12 months, it's the most likely camera that could benefit from this patent application. Now, in terms of the likelihood of this patent application, we're going to cover that off later in this video. But essentially, what we're hearing in this patent application is a sensor that can do both rolling shutter and global shutter, all in the same sensor, not some sort of, and we do have cameras out there that have up to 3 different sensors, a red, a blue, and a green. But this patent application isn't talking about multiple sensors, it's talking about a single sensor. The only question is, how are they planning on doing this? Well, it all goes back to that detailed description. The sensor has dual capabilities, providing the ability to capture high-quality images without the limitations normally associated with using a single shutter type. By allowing parts of the image to be captured with a global shutter and other parts with a rolling shutter, the technology aims to deliver superior image quality and the flexibility in various shooting situations. And that's what's remarkable about this patent application. The ability of a single sensor to act as either a global shutter or a rolling shutter, or more importantly, to be able to determine based on whatever scenario you're shooting in, how much of that frame should be read out as either a rolling shutter or a global shutter. Because what a global shutter allows you to do is to pretty much, well, completely eliminate any sort of motion blur. Whereas a rolling shutter, well, it gives you that speed. And there are certain scenarios where, for the majority of the frame, you're pretty happy to capture it as a rolling shutter, and the rest of it, well, you'd really like this area to not have any motion blur. It's pretty impressive, but I know there's some of you that, well, you love watching Gerald Undone and you want a bit more detail. So Well, let's dig a little deeper into how this all happens. The patent outlines a system where a group of pixels, let's call it the first area, can be read out globally, while simultaneously allowing another group of pixels in a second area to be read out rolling or Gangnam style. This means that during a single shot, the sensor can leverage both advantages without needing to switch off entirely between different methods. So that improves signal readout speed, along with a new should we call it a circuit, a new circuit. That's how the patent refers to it, but it could be just part of a chip. It could be a certain section on a chip, but it refers to a new circuit along with that signal readout speed that's going to be able to deliver much improved image quality. The ability to use both shutter methods means improved image quality across various conditions. This flexibility can be particularly beneficial for videographers and photographers dealing with dynamic environments. But while the Sony A9 III delivers a global shutter sensor, allowing photographers to take shots of the fastest moving subjects without blur, providing instant readout, it can't deliver a very high dynamic range. Its ISO range is rather limited. But to be able to deliver the higher dynamic range that we see in RED's cameras like the Red V Raptor X and XL with 17 to 20 stops, that would be a game changer for the Nikon Z9 Mark II. And we've got plenty of articles, plenty of interviews where Nikon has said that they plan to leverage all the technologies that they acquired through the purchase of RED. And when I covered this, I always thought it was really strange with how the dispute kind of ended. It left me wondering, it didn't make a lot of sense. And then when we had the acquisition that finally solidified earlier this year, I thought, wow. Nikon didn't have a cinema department. They didn't have really a video-centric camera section like other camera makers like, well, Sony and Canon, or even Panasonic. But this acquisition gave them not only a cinema division, but a well-entrenched cinema company like RED that is used for producing Hollywood movies, television shows, Netflix, movies, and TV shows. It's kind of a big deal. And their sensors in the Red V Raptor X and XL able to deliver 17 stops of dynamic range base and up to 20 stops with a certain feature turned on. That is exciting. And they're not just taking the sensor technology from RED, they're using their engineers and RED's engineers to come up with a novel way of doing this, having a single sensor that can read out both rolling shutter style or global shutter style, but also to determine what part of the frame or the shot should be read out as global or rolling shutter. So that way we can have the benefits of that faster readout speed while also delivering, well, imagine bird photographers shooting hummingbirds no longer suffering from any sort of motion blur at all. That's impressive. And the Nikon Z9 right now, and the Nikon Z9, which was announced in October of 2021, is $54.96, while the Nikon Z8 is $500 off at $34.96. And with the Nikon Z8 being a mini Z9, if the Nikon Z9 gets this technology, I wouldn't be surprised if it then comes out in the Nikon Z8, and that will help give them economies of scale. Now, will that further come down to the Nikon Z6 Mark III? Well, it wouldn't. It would come down to the Nikon Z6 Mark IV, but would it come down to that price point? Yeah, that's a good question. Now, the Nikon Z6 Mark III has been referred to as a mini Z8 with some features stripped off. And this is one of those features I could definitely see stripped off. But remember, when Nikon came out with the Z6 Mark III, they gave it a quasi-stacked sensor, giving it a lot of the benefits of a faster readout speed, but with some other drawbacks. But essentially, you got a much faster readout speed, which was rather impressive. I still think that camera is best in class. But now what we need to do is address, well, the elephant in the room when it comes to patent applications. We constantly see, I don't know how many we see on a daily basis, dozens of patent applications from Canon, but do we actually see these come out in cameras? Do we actually see these patents filed on a shelf just to protect their research and development? And the answer is yes to both. I want to take you back to the fourth quarter of 2023. We didn't really have a lot of patent applications coming out, we didn't really have a lot of rumors coming out in the R5 Mark II. So I spent a lot of time covering off all the patent applications, and I found dozens of patent applications covering the autofocus system, from tracking subjects, from tracking different types of objects, from different types of cameras. I found, oh my God, there are so many different patent applications. And I said, look, we're seeing enough of these patent applications that are talking about improvements to the autofocus system, tracking the subject where that goes into the frame, out of the frame temporarily, is obstructed by another subject for certain sports situations, having heat pipes in the cameras. I said, we've seen so many of these that I'd be surprised if the R5 Mark II and the R1 don't have significant upgrades to the autofocus system, to which they did. And the R5 Mark II did get those heat pipes, along with many other upgrades. So while I think that there is a chance that this patent application could sit on a shelf and not end up in the Nikon Z9 and Nikon Z8, I'm not 100% sure. And here's what I'm thinking. This is just a single patent application on this. If Nikon is going to improve the sensor using RED technology, their intellectual property, in the Z9 Mark II, well, I expect to see many more patent applications. And once we start to see more patent applications, we'll get a very good idea of the type of design that's going to be used. Because what Nikon could do here is use this sensor where it can read out both global shutter and rolling shutter at the same time, depending on the type of shooting scenario. Or they could just decide to put a global shutter sensor in this camera like they did in the Sony with the A9 III. But the difference is the Sony A9 III is only putting out about 24 megapixels, whereas the Nikon Z9, 45.7 megapixels. That's a lot of pixels, no matter how you slice it. 45.7 million pixels. That's a huge amount. That becomes a much tougher challenge for a global shutter sensor because you've got 4 times the amount of information. So double the resolution is 4 times the amount of information. This is a way to solve that problem. So my question to you is, do you think that we could see this technology in the Nikon Z9 Mark II? Or do you think that we might see a different technology and this patent application might sit on the shelf? Well, we don't have any rumored specifications for the Nikon Z9 Mark II. I'm putting this on the board as the first set of, how should we say, well, evidence, because this is coming from Nikon themselves. This is not something coming from a trusted, reliable source at Nikon Rumors or me. This is Nikon's own words from engineers and lawyers that they've published in a patent application. So we know they're thinking about it. And you got to know that the Nikon Z9, the Mark II, isn't just going to come out with a stacked sensor. I think Nikon's going to shock the world, and that's something I'm really excited about. Now, if you are interested in purchasing the Nikon Z8 at $500 off, or even the Nikon Z9 or any other camera, we've got over, I think, 20 or 30 sales on right now. I've got them in the description down below. If you're interested in purchasing them, please purchase using my links down below because I get a small commission back anywhere from around 2 to 5%, which really does help this channel grow. You can think of this channel as being member supported, or I should say viewer supported. And the best part is, you don't have to send me anything. You don't pay any extra. You don't have to fill in any forms or put in any codes. It takes you directly to Adorama, B&H, or Amazon.com. You get to save money, get a great new camera or lens, and you get to help keep this channel on the air. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, for commenting, for watching. It's very much appreciated. Now, one thing I do want to say an apology is yesterday when I put out a video about the R5 Mark II and a jerky autofocus system, something happened. You see, I have a laptop down here and I have a script that I roughly follow. I don't always follow it to the letter, and sometimes if I'm talking like I am now, I'm on a bit of a rant and it's going well, I'll keep going. And then I look down and look to the next paragraph that I need to follow. But you see, I had left out one key paragraph earlier on in the video, which talks about a workaround to that issue. So my apologies, and I saw one of the first comments was, I watched for 5 minutes and you didn't give me anything. And I apologize, it was there, so I'm going to go ahead and put that up right now on the screen. It comes from the exact same source as I quoted yesterday. But again, thank you so much for watching, commenting. It's very much appreciated. We'll see you again soon.